welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to do another session of mass producing. I have 23 card front panels here that I've cut down to 4 by 5 1/4, and I have my stamp set from Glittering Ornaments from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to use this circle snowflake image here. We're going to do some heat embossing today, so you see on my desk my Versamark, my gold embossing powder. I actually re-inked this ink pad, and just so it would save me a little bit of time. And I'm going to be using this mistletoe wreath. It has a banner stamp in it, and I'm going to be using the banner part of that. I'm going to show you the die, the coordinating die, but I don't end up actually using that. This card kind of changed as it went along. I don't end up using that die, but it is an option that you can purchase separately. And I chose to do that. We're back to that Ornaments Pinkfresh stamp set, and I'm using the sentiment here. It just fit pretty well inside that banner. I showed you a string. I don't end up actually using that, but it is an option. So I'm going to end up kind of curving this stamp set to fit inside this banner image once I've heat embossed it. I'm using my gold embossing powder from Ranger, my Versamark, and I already re-inked that, so you don't have to watch me do that all over again. I have there's my anti-static powder tool, my little brush, my coffee filter to catch my excess embossing powder, and we are going to go ahead and jump right into it. I already have a card front panel mounted in there, and we're going to go ahead and get going. Oh, here I'm showing you, I already have my card bases made. They're folded, they're regular A2 size card base, and I've already stamped my little logo on the back. That's another tip for mass producing. If you know you're going to be using all of a white card base, all white envelopes, gather all of those things and get those things prepped and ready to go. That just makes things go a lot faster. If those little steps are already taken care of, it's the gathering and the cutting and the prepping that typically takes the longest. And so getting those things out of the way is very helpful as far as making this process go a lot faster. So here, I've never used these stamps before, so I'm just rubbing my fingers on them to get the manufacturing residue off. Like I've said in other videos, there are tools out there that will do this, will help facilitate this process. I just use my hand because my hand's already there. So I have put my embossing powder, my anti-static powder on the cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and ink it up, and I'm going to stamp it. Because I've recently re-inked this, I don't have to stamp it multiple times, and that is also another time saver. Have juicy ink pads, or use inks that you have refills for, so that as you're going along, as you're stamping, 24 different things, 40 different things, whatever, you don't have to deal with multiple stampings because your ink pad is getting dry and needs re-inked. So either re-ink it before you start, or use an ink pad that you have that is brand spanking new, or that you have re-inkers for. So here I just noticed that I didn't press well. There's actually a little bubble in this stamp. I got an air bubble in there. It doesn't really affect it. It just affected it that one time, and then I knew it was there, and so I was a little more careful on how I stamped my images. So here I'm just pouring over that Ranger gold embossing powder, flicking off the excess, using my coffee filter to catch it. And I think that's beautiful. Now, gray and like gold, yes, is more holiday, but like gray cardstock, not necessarily. But you can do untraditional colors and it be okay. You don't have to stick to red and green and gold and white. You don't. It's your card. You do what you want. Here I have black, of all things, and I think the black one looks beautiful. In fact, I'm looking at it right now, and I think it's pretty. I think it's beautiful. So you do you. If you get bored with using the same colors over and over and over, but you have to mass produce, hey, you do you, and you change those colors up. It is a-okay. So here I'm just stamping out the gold. Now, I know you can see that anti-static powder on there. We will take care of that in a minute, but for now, it's there. Like I said, we'll go back and get rid of that. So I'm just going to pour my embossing powder back on there, tap off the excess, use that coffee filter, and we are going to repeat this for all. I have 23 colored card panels here. I would have had 24, but I used one in the previous card set that I made in the previous video, and so I have 23. So we're going to make 23 cards here. This took me about 3 hours, approximately, which is pretty fast for 23 cards. Now, granted, I did have the card bases already cut and stamped, and all I had to do was grab 23 envelopes, so that's not a big deal. But that's pretty quick for 23 cards. So we're just going to repeat this process, and we're going to move on to the next step. So now I have all of them stamped. They all have their embossing powder, and now we're going to heat set all 23 panels at one time. So I let my heat gun get really, really hot. Now this is higher quality cardstock, so it's much thicker, but this still warps some. But to help prevent some of that warping, go ahead and heat your heat gun up for at least a minute, 30 seconds bare minimum. Get it good and hot, because the longer that your heat gun is on your paper, the more chances you have of it warping. So get it good and hot, and that way you can heat things quickly and then move on. After I've heat embossed probably the first 4 or 5 panels, it goes by super, super fast. I love that on this gold, you can really see that heat embossing get all sparkly and shiny and smooth. If you have any spots when you're heat embossing that are dull or grainy looking, then they're not heat set. You need to hit them with your heat gun. Conversely, if it looks like the dimension is gone, because there is just ever so slightly just a little bit of like texture when you heat emboss, if that texture goes away and it looks almost matte instead of shiny, you've heat set it too long, because your heat embossing powder has essentially melted into your paper instead of sitting on top of it. So be cautious of that. I was really cautious of that because when I go and stamp my sentiment inside that banner, I'm essentially reheating that banner. And so I was really careful that the second that the wording, the greeting turned colors, I moved on because I really didn't want to remelt that embossing powder of the banner. Here's that yellow that if you watched my previous video gave me so much fits. It looks so much better in the gold. The white, I think I used vintage pearl, is pretty. It just didn't show up on this pretty yellow. The gold looks so much better. So lessons learned, learn some things every day. Isn't that right? So that is the heat embossing, and I'm going to go through and do every single one of these panels. Okay, y'all. So I showed this grid transparency in my last video. I ended up not using it. I ended up getting really frustrated not using it. So I'm showing you that Ornaments, the Ornaments stamp set from Pinkfresh Studio. I'm showing you a string stamp and then the sentiment. Okay, I could not for the life of me get this to line up. The cardstock had warped some, and that was causing some problems. I couldn't get it to line up straight, and then I couldn't get my sentiment to line up straight. So I ended up kind of just winging it and throwing this grid transparency off to the side. It was supposed to help. It wasn't. It was just easier to kind of eyeball it. And eventually I decided I'm not going to even use this little stamp string here, and I'm just going to draw it in. But I fiddled with it for a while because I'm bound and determined, and then I just give up. Here I've just attached it to the door of my MISTI, and I'm using the, cling feature of these stamp sets to kind of manipulate it into a curve that works well and is spaced well with this banner shape. I fiddle with this for an astronomical amount of time. it probably would have been just fine if I would have laid it on there straight. There's not a huge curve in there, and there's really not a huge curve in it when I place it on there, but I mess with it for a long time. But I'm just using the door, my Misty, instead of that grid to help me align this stamp set. So we're just going to go through and we are going to apply our anti-static powder. Once again, now that I've got that stamp all lined up, I'm going to apply my ink, my Versamark ink, and then stamp it down. I'm going to apply my gold embossing powder, and I'm going to do all of this step to every single one of the cards. If you remember from previous videos, that was another tip. Do all of the same step all at one time. Don't complete a card and then complete another card and then complete another card. Do all of the same step at one time. That is a huge time saver and helps things go by so much quicker. So we're just repeating the same process that we did when we stamped the snowflakes and the banner. Apply your anti-static powder, apply your Versamark ink, or whatever ink pad you're using. Several stamp companies have their own embossing ink. This is just what I've used for a very, very, very long time. It works for me, and so I probably won't change anytime soon. So I'm going to go through and heat set all of these at one time. I just put some of the colors that I hadn't shown you before on here. That gold navy is so pretty and so classy and timeless for the holidays and for Christmas. I'm just going to go through and heat set all of that. And I noticed that I had some grainy bits on that one, so I went and hit those too. It was a good chance to kind of double check that everything was looking right. And like I said, I'm heating up that banner at the same time, so I'm trying to go through really quick so that I don't melt it into the paper. So the anti-static powder leaves a residue. So like I told you in the beginning of this video, I'm going to go back with, this is a Swiffer cloth from Dollar Tree. So it's not even like, it's the Dollar Tree Swiffer brand. And I'm just going to go through and get all of that anti-static powder off. If you have some spots that are still kind of cloudy and milky looking, I just use my hand, and the oils from my hand take it off. So once I've done that to every single one of these panels, I'm going to go ahead and glue them to my card bases. So here I felt like these cards needed something. It just looked like a ball of snowflakes hanging in nowhere. So I'm going to take this American Crafts metallic marker, and I'm going to, in the color gold, I don't even know if this is still available. Y'all, I've had this for probably 10 years. I know I got it when I lived in Utah, and that was a very long time ago. But all I did was freehand a like rectangle and a string, and I wasn't sure if I liked it. And so I was like, well, what if I add like the, I don't know, indentions that, ornament toppers have? What if I add some of those with the black marker? So I used my 0.5 fine liner from Paper Studio and added some lines. And I was like, I still don't know if I like that. But I was committed to this point, and I was like, well, what is it? It still feels like it's missing something. So I added what looked like little strings and ribbons, and that was better. I was trying to figure out if I had any like ornament toppers in my stash, and I don't. I didn't like just the string, just a line, because it just looked like a line. It didn't make any sense. So I decided to commit fully and go ahead and add the entire ornament topper. And then I went back and did add 3 lines with that fine liner pen to complete that. Now I'm just going to go ahead and glue all of these card bases these card front panels to a card base that is A2 size. You're going to notice that there is a small thin white border around, which is what I wanted. I didn't want to have to go back and redo this. I know you guys can hear my daughter. She's waking up, and my dog is like wandering around and pacing the floor. Here on the back of this, I was just trying to figure out if the colors that I had worked well and made sense. They were okay. I picked the one that looked the best with it. So that's what you're seeing on the back. And then I'm just taking my mini Misty and using that to apply some weight so that these card front panels, because they did warp a little bit, can get good adherence to the card base. these card front panels can get good adherence to the card base. I'm using reptile glue in a little squeeze bottle that I got from Amazon. It came in like a pack of like 10. I only needed like 2. And then voila, here we are. They are all done. I do think they needed that little ornament topper. If I would have had a stamp, I would have used it. But like I said, I didn't have one. So here are all 23 cards, all done. I hope you got some tips and some tricks and some information. I hope you feel inspired to maybe try a rainbow of colors for your mass producing, even if it's not a true traditional Christmas color. I hope you give it a try. If you haven't watched my previous videos, there are 2 more. They are long. Sorry about you. This is probably the shortest one I've got. But I hope you enjoy, and I hope you check those out, and we will catch you in the next video. Bye.